All right, 3 stories, one for each attorney here. We're going to start with Jimmy. The story, top judge in New York State issues a rule requiring criminal court judges to order prosecutors to disclose all evidence favorable to the defense at least 30 days before trials. Big deal or not so big a deal?
Look, it's a very big deal. The fact that a judge is directing a prosecutor to do that is very important. It's going to force the prosecutor to look into that file and make sure that there isn't any exculpatory evidence, which is evidence that tends to exonerate a defendant, evidence that helps with cross-examination of witnesses and so on and so forth. It's a very big deal. It's very important. Over 300 exonerations, 80 of which over the past few years were because of the failure to disclose this information.
Aren't they supposed to do it now, or is it discretionary?
That's my point. The law, the Constitution says that you are duty-bound as a prosecutor to disclose that information when you are aware of it. So, you know something? I'm actually not happy with this 30-day thing, because think about it. You have a homicide that's been pending for 2.5 years. Now you're going to trial in 30 days, and that's when you find out that some witness from 2.5 years ago said that somebody else did it or casts doubt on the credibility of a witness. It's a good thing, but this should be disclosed immediately.
All right. Now we head over to New Jersey, and this story is from Mayo. Garden State has reformed its bail system. Talked quite a bit about it on this program here. And they greatly reduced cash bail. It's trying to avoid sending people to jail just because they can't pay. Instead, many people are getting house arrest. But now, groups in the bail industry are suing to overturn the reforms. So, explain what this means. Good, bad, and different. People talk about ankle bracelets and everything else. Translate this.
Well, it's preventing people from going to jail, okay? But on the other hand, house arrest, I still have an issue with, because if you're presumed innocent until proven guilty, then really you ought to be able to come and go freely unless there's a reason for the court to feel that you won't do so. So, for instance, if you're from out of state or you're not a citizen of the United States, and you can leave and freely go someplace else never to return, then I understand bail. But even then, what's the likelihood that you're not going to avail yourself of the court's process? The only reason you have bail is to make sure that a person comes back to court basically to answer the charges.
Good start, or is it not that big a deal?
I think that there ought to be a presumption of release, period, without house arrest. And that should be the vast majority of the cases. So if you, especially petty offenses, misdemeanors, those people ought to be able to come and go as they please. They shouldn't be required to stay at home, limited to going to work or school.
How many people don't show up?
Very few. For the most part, you'd be amazed, and I'm sure that Doug and Jimmy would give you stories of people who have every incentive to leave, and we're all shocked when the people come back as prosecutors or defense attorneys, because most folks come back and they do the right thing. And also, most people understand what they did. So when you know you're wrong, you stole whatever you stole, you sold drugs, you come in, you do your time.
Interesting. All right. Now a story for Doug about cash settlements. Johnson & Johnson lost judgments to the tune of $500 million. That's when women sued, saying its talcum powder caused ovarian cancer. Well, a higher court just reversed the decisions, but the biggest one, it is getting retried. And it got us thinking, Doug, it's not a direct question, but at least a question I always had. People like us hear large settlements, like the coffee, you know, they burn somebody, and the huge number. Well, the amount of settlement, what's the reality between what the court, and you've been involved in a lot of high number cases here, you get awarded it. Tell the folks what the difference is with the number that the court awards versus what the actual client sees, and how long that takes from when that decision's handed down to the money actually gets in the victim's hands.
Okay, you use the word settlement. If you have a settlement where both parties agree to settle it for an X amount of money, that money gets paid within X amount of days, 30, 90, whatever they agree upon. So we're really talking about verdicts. So if there's a verdict, the verdict is after the trial's over, the trial judge will look at that verdict and they'll make a determination of whether that verdict is too high. They can actually add to the verdict too, very rare, but they'll say if that verdict is way too high, I will reduce that verdict.
All right, let's do scenario A. Let's say $100 million here in some of the cases you've handled. Verdict comes down, judge finds that to be the appropriate amount. Obviously, the defense is afforded appeal process. Typically, what happens here, peel back the curtain for the audience. What are the kind of conversations that happens once the verdict's handed down, judge sees obviously merit in the number. What happens from that point?
Well, if the one side thinks it's way too high, they'll appeal it to the next level appellate court. And
Don't they do it no matter what here because they
They
want to
will.
write the check?
They will, definitely will. What they'll do is if the lower court says, I think that verdict is, that number is too high, will you, plaintiff's attorney, agree on this lower number, stipulate to the number? If you'll agree, then you'll take that off the table. But they still can appeal the other issues in the trial. Really what happens at that point is it affords both sides the opportunity to negotiate a settlement where they both agree upon a number. And if they don't, then it could be appealed once again.
On average, for big verdicts, how long does it take before your client actually sees the money?
Where it keeps being appealed down the line can be years.
Jeez.
That's why a settlement sometimes is very important, to get money into the person's hands sooner rather than later.
Great job as always, guys. All right, up next, we got some local headlines. Stay with us.